We all know that forces like the World Economic Forum, the Federal Reserve, and Bill Gates have all been pushing for centralized bank digital currency or CBDC for some time. And we all know that CBDCs can be a threat to our individual freedoms and liberty. But there is one group recently that confirmed a planned development of an international CBDC, a digital currency that could be used internationally to trade and make investments. And if that sounds familiar to you, this might pave for the way for a one world currency that is ultimately managed by a one world government. Even in the Bible, specifically the book of Revelation, there's references to what some may interpret as the one world government in chapter 13 in the book of Revelation, especially where it mentions the following verse, such as, "And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation." But in order for such one world government to gain power, it will need to control all trade and commerce. Hence why I believe that a one world currency would be instituted. So what are the details with this one world currency and how is it exactly being developed right now? Let's dive right in. First, let's go and talk about the group itself that's planning to develop an international CBDC. The group consists of countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This group, some of you may know, is known as BRICS. They say that the BRICS goal is to promote peace, security, development, and cooperation as countries with emerging economy and power. Promoting peace and security, where have I heard that before? Empire. And just recently, BRICS invited 6 additional countries such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Argentina, and Ethiopia to join BRICS as a member country. What's interesting is that once these countries are added to the BRICS team, these countries will now control 80% of the world's oil production. That also means that more and more countries that have been historically adversarial to the United States are joining forces together. And keep in mind, Russia is technically in war with the rest of the Western country, the US included. So pressure is mounting against the United States. What's also is interesting is that if you read Ezekiel 38 verses 5 and 6, it talks about how there will be 5 nations that would join forces to invade Israel, led by Russia, which is often interpreted as the land of Magog. Ethiopia and Iran are 2 of the 5 nations that are referenced by the book of Ezekiel that are supposed to invade Israel as part of an end-time prophecy. And now they're being invited to BRICS to form a coalition and an alliance together. Now, of course, we can get deeper and deeper into what BRICS is and how they form, but that's really what you need to know for the context of this video. But here's what BRICS, in collaboration with Bill Gates, the IMF, Visa, MasterCard, and the World Economic Forum are doing is rather disturbing. Now, earlier in August 2023, an organization called Nobel Sustainability Trust has announced that they are launching an organization called Central Bank Digital Currency Collaboration Organization, also known as CBDCC in short. Now, the objective of CBDCCO is to essentially help countries around the world implement CBDCs by sharing technologies and intellectual property with one another. Now, real quick, for those that don't know what CBDC is or may not be familiar with it, here's a quick 15-second catch-up of what it is. A CBDC is a type of a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum that is created by a central bank and a government. And unlike the traditional form of a fiat currency like the US dollar, a CBDC is highly programmable and controlled by the central bank beyond what's capable of right now. Now, what we're talking about is not just one nation's CBDC exclusively for that country. We're talking about a potential for a global CBDC that will be used by multiple, if not all, countries around the world to trade and buy investments. And organizations like the CBDCCO and the World Economic Forum argue that a global CBDC would help countries around the world to send and receive money across borders faster and cheaper. Now, traditionally, countries would have to purchase the US dollar first to exchange goods and services around the world, which can be a costly thing to do. And of course, the US gets to play the middleman because the US dollar is the world reserve currency. So the CBDCCO being launched into full operation will be set to go in January of 2024. Now, I'll get to the part where how all of this might hurt us. Our retirement account, like 401k, IRA, pensions, all of this in just one sec, so definitely stick around to the end. Now, if there's one country that's been the first to really adopt the CBDC for everyday use, is China.
China.
And just as we imagined, China is using CBDCs to restrict its citizens' financial freedom and choices. So right now, in this very moment, China's digital currency, which is called digital yuan, can be programmed to have a set expiration date so that it forces the citizens to spend it faster. And the government can even set limitations on what and how much of something that someone can buy. One example might be to set a limit on how much meat you can buy in a given month. So if you buy 2 pounds of ribeye steak, that might be all that you could buy, simply because the government can control and set limits on the amount of meat you eat. Oh, and by the way, the US also has been in talks of implementing a CBDC for several years now. So China's reality could soon become our reality here in the United States. And because China has been using CBDC for some time, they figured out the technology to implement the idea of a CBDC for other countries as well. That's why CBDCCO has appointed a Chinese man with the name of Dr. Bruno Wu as the chairman of the board. In fact, some sources say that Dr. Bruno Wu is actually a registered spy with the Chinese Communist Party. So what we're talking about here is a man tied directly to the Chinese Communist Party being the head of the organization that could have the potential to institute a one world currency. So let's get this straight. A new organization called CBDCO appoints a potential Chinese spy as its leader, and they're planning to institute a one world currency system, especially amongst the BRICS country to compete against the US dollar? Yeah. So first, what does this mean for the US dollar and ultimately for us? I mean, how would this precisely hurt our freedoms and liberties here in the United States? Well, for one, if an international digital currency becomes a reality, it will be a direct competitor for the US dollar as the world reserve currency status. Currently, approximately 80% of all world trade is done with the US dollar. So if China wants to buy lumber or wood from, say, Turkey, they would have to first exchange their Chinese yuan, their currency, to the US dollar to pay for the goods. Then on the flip side, Turkey will need to accept the payment in US dollar only to exchange it back into the Turkish currency. Now the reason why it's done this way is because the world believes the US as a country is incredibly stable. Unlike some countries, criminals are in charge and they get to do whatever they want to do. But with an international digital currency, China just would have to go directly to Turkey to buy lumber and pay with a digital currency without having to go through the United States or even buying the US dollar for that matter. This would ultimately mean that the US dollar will lose its value and less country will want to buy US dollar, which means no longer will the US will be able to keep on printing money to fix our problems here at home. Not only could that reality crash the US dollar, but it will have a devastating blow to the US economy. I mean, forget your 401k, your IRA, and your pension. Buying groceries will become a nightmare if that becomes a reality. I mean, imagine gas being $10, $15, $20 a gallon when you go at the pumps. And to avoid that potential reality, the US just might enter into a brutal war just to maintain its economic prowess and control through its military. Could this mean a direct war with the United States against BRICS nation, which of course the winner of the war would dictate what the next 100+ years could look like for the world economy. Now, just like what I alluded to earlier, if an international one world currency were to become reality, soon we might find ourselves with an organization stepping up to maintain the currency, resolving disputes, and programming the digital currency itself. Now, my personal prediction is that this organization might start off small, or less people might know about it. It could be an extension of the UN, maybe the IMF, or even the World Economic Forum. But over time, through small increments or out of a crisis, I can potentially see this organization growing in its powers to control and regulate the entirety of the world's trade and commerce. And as this happens, the US will slowly begin to lose its influence in the world. In fact, this goes right back to the Great Reset agenda. One of the goals of the Great Reset by 2030 is for the US to be no longer the world leading superpower, but a handful of the other countries will share that power. So all in all, with the potential reality of an international currency coming soon, a one world currency, there's so much more that we could have unpacked. I mean, we could talk about the mark of the beast and how it's connected to this, the Great Reset, the US dollar crash, so much more. But how exactly should you prepare for this possibility? Well, as a financial expert myself and an advocate for freedom, I believe the number one focus for all of us is to learn new skills, to invest in yourself, and acquire new knowledge and wisdom. If you can acquire skills that can solve real-world problems for people, you will always find ways to get paid. In fact, this is exactly how Daniel and I were able to amass our wealth. So take advantage of what little capitalism we have left in our country. I believe the fastest and the most ethical way of transferring wealth from others to you is by providing solutions to their problems. You might be 30, 40, 50, or even 60 years old, schooled or unschooled. There's never been a better time to be able to learn new skills with the power of the internet and access to information. So my point there is to become relevant in the economy. Then, once you're able to bring in new income streams and increase your income, learn new financial strategies that can help you create self-sufficient streams of income through insurance, real estate, annuities, and other vehicles of investments. So it's all about minimizing the pitfalls that could happen to you, right? As you do this, you want to start really looking at protecting yourself from life-threatening events by securing firearms, emergency food, ammo, backup water, etc. Definitely go check out some of the other YouTube creators that talk more about this for sure. And most importantly, form a community with other like-minded individuals. I truly believe that no man or woman can live in an island alone. We are created to live in community, to support and help one another. I mean, this is why Daniel and I ultimately do these shows on YouTube, so that we can find you guys, the freedom-loving people out there, so that we can all group together to be in a community, to really support one another and bring awareness to all these topics that we're talking about. Now, speaking of freedom, there are rumors of COVID lockdowns coming back. Now, some are saying that masking will come back, vaccine mandates will be back, where you can't go to a restaurant or your favorite movie theaters without a vaccine. I mean, we may have to live through all the shenanigans and nonsense once again. So Daniel does an excellent job unpacking what could be the next quote-unquote COVID lockdown coming very soon. For that video, click right here so that you can be prepared this time. This time, we will be ready so that we won't be fooled or pressured to do things that are against our own freedoms and our rights. We will not comply.